Emma Foster thought she had found her forever in Daniel Reed, but just 3 weeks after their wedding, Daniel drugged her, harvested her organs, and buried her in a shallow grave, proving that behind his charming smile hid something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. Emma Foster had always lived a quiet, predictable life. She taught fourth grade at a small elementary school in Charlotte, North Carolina, where everyone knew her as kind, dependable, and a little shy. Her routine rarely changed: work, coffee with friends, Sunday visits to her parents. She wasn't one to chase excitement. In fact, she preferred stability. That's why, when she met Daniel Reed at a local charity book sale, no one was more surprised than Emma herself at how quickly everything unfolded. Daniel was different. He stood out. Tall, confident, with a calm voice and a smile that seemed to disarm everyone in the room. He said he was a software engineer who had just relocated from Seattle for a remote job and a change of pace. Emma was drawn to him almost immediately. He asked questions no one else asked. He remembered the name of her dog, the books she liked, the way she twirled her ring when she was nervous. Within 2 months, he'd woven himself into every part of her life. He started showing up at her school to bring lunch, surprising her with flowers, charming her coworkers. Her friends were cautious at first. It all seemed so fast, but Emma beamed whenever she talked about him. Her parents were just glad she'd finally met someone who made her happy. After 6 months, Daniel proposed during a weekend cabin trip in the mountains. Emma cried and said yes. It felt sudden, but the way he made her feel erased any doubts. Their wedding was small, held in her parents' backyard under a sky of string lights and warm July air. Daniel planned most of it, saying he wanted to take the stress off her shoulders. He picked the menu, arranged the flowers, even chose the music. Emma, overwhelmed by how thoughtful he was, didn't object. Everyone commented on how perfect they looked together. People called it a fairy tale romance, something right out of a movie. No one noticed how Daniel's past remained mostly a mystery. He told Emma bits and pieces, that his parents had passed, that he had no siblings, that he'd moved to start over. She didn't push for more. She trusted him. He always had an answer, always seemed grounded. What she didn't know was that none of it was real. The job, the background, even his name, every detail had been carefully fabricated. Daniel Reed wasn't who he claimed to be. In truth, he had been living under different aliases for years, moving from place to place, never staying too long. His charm wasn't accidental, it was a tool, sharpened through practice. Just 3 weeks after the wedding, Daniel suggested they take a break from the world and spend time at a rental cottage on the outskirts of town. He said it would be a honeymoon, a reset before starting their new life. Emma, still basking in the glow of marriage, didn't hesitate. She told her friends and coworkers she'd be gone for a little while, maybe a few weeks. Daniel handled all the bookings, the packing, even the travel arrangements. The cottage was nestled at the edge of a wooded area, far from neighbors and surrounded by quiet. Emma thought it was peaceful. Daniel called it unplugged paradise. They had no landline, limited cell service, and no visitors. Emma didn't mind. She felt safe with him. That was his greatest strength, making her feel like nothing could go wrong. But while Emma cooked simple meals and took walks through the trees, Daniel was on his laptop late into the night, deep in forums and encrypted websites. He had joined hidden networks and contacted anonymous brokers. Organ trafficking was a cruel and calculated business, but it was lucrative. He had debts in places he wouldn't speak of, debts that could only be paid in blood. Emma, to him, was not a wife. She was an asset. He began preparing slowly. He started giving her supplements, calling them natural vitamins to help with stress. In truth, they were sedatives, low doses at first, enough to make her feel tired, groggy. He adjusted her diet, telling her he was looking out for her health. Emma trusted him completely. She took the pills, ate the food, and blamed the exhaustion on the change of pace. Each day she became more fatigued, less alert. Daniel reassured her. He brought her tea, held her hand, and reminded her how good it was to be away from the world. When she slept, he checked her pulse and documented her weight. Everything was recorded. He had a timeline, a buyer, and a promise to deliver, and he was on schedule. No one knew. No one suspected. From the outside, Emma had simply gone on a trip with her husband. Her social media had a few recent post pictures of trees, sunsets, a photo of their rented cottage. But she hadn't written the captions. Daniel had. He kept up the illusion perfectly, scheduling posts to trick anyone who might wonder. 3 weeks after the wedding, Emma Foster had no idea her life was already over. She wasn't missing. She hadn't run away. She was exactly where Daniel needed her to be, out of sight, out of reach, and dangerously close to never coming back. The cottage where Emma and Daniel stayed was small but picturesque, the kind of place you'd expect to see in a vacation brochure. Surrounded by thick woods and miles from the nearest road, it was designed for privacy. To Emma, it felt like a quiet retreat. To Daniel, it was the perfect location: no neighbors, no cameras, no questions. As the days passed, Emma found herself growing more tired, but she chalked it up to adjusting to a slower pace. Her body ached, her head felt foggy. She thought maybe she was just run down from wedding stress. Daniel maintained the illusion of care. He brought her meals, prepared tea, and made sure she stayed on her new health routine. The herbal drinks he gave her were laced with sedatives and chemicals designed to suppress her energy and mental clarity. She trusted him, even thanked him. That was the part that made it so chilling, how completely she believed he was helping her. Each morning, she found it harder to get out of bed. Her limbs felt heavy, her appetite faded, and she started sleeping longer and longer. Daniel began taking walks alone in the woods, sometimes gone for hours. He said he was clearing his mind, maybe gathering firewood. What he was actually doing was meeting with 2 men contacts he had made months earlier, scouting the back of the property, making notes of where the soil was soft enough to dig. Emma's phone was turned off to disconnect, Daniel had told her. He said they needed a break from screens and that being offline would help her feel better. Meanwhile, he used her device when she was asleep to send texts and emails to her family, ensuring no one got suspicious. Short, casual messages. "We're having a peaceful time here, no reception most days. Don't worry, love you all." It worked, no alarms were raised. But subtle cracks began to show, and the skin grew pale. She experienced dizzy spells. One night she collapsed in the kitchen. Daniel caught her before she hit the floor and eased her onto the couch. He held her hand, wiped her forehead, and told her everything would be okay. She smiled weakly, believing him. He already knew the timeline was narrowing. Her body was beginning to show the strain of his plan, and it wouldn't be long before she became too weak to function. He had to act soon. He had already paid the fixer, an unlicensed middleman with dark web access and connections to underground clinics. In return, the fixer had arranged for a former military medic, stripped of his credentials for illegal surgeries, to be flown into the state. The date was set. The clinic would be temporary, set up in the abandoned structure near the woods, close enough to reach by foot, hidden enough to avoid detection. Everything was falling into place. Back at the cottage, Emma's condition had worsened. She barely had the strength to stand and had stopped eating entirely. Still, she didn't panic. She told herself she'd recover with rest. She trusted Daniel completely. That was the most terrifying part. She felt safe in the arms of the man who had engineered every symptom she was experiencing. Her body was shutting down, and she still believed he would protect her. Daniel began preparing her for transport. He wrapped her in blankets, placed her gently in the back seat of his SUV, and whispered that he was taking her to a nearby wellness retreat he had found. She nodded faintly, too weak to question him. The ride was short but bumpy. Her head rolled slightly against the window. She couldn't see where they were going. Her vision had begun to blur. The building looked like a large, decaying cabin, but inside it had been outfitted with basic medical tools and cold metal tables. The medic and fixer were already there, wearing masks, gloves, and carrying bags that held surgical tools. Daniel carried Emma inside, laid her down, and stepped back. She didn't resist. She couldn't. What happened next was clinical and cruel. The medic worked with speed. The fixer recorded and documented everything for the buyers. Emma, unconscious and barely alive, was stripped of her kidneys, corneas, and liver organs already promised to clients overseas. It was done in under an hour. Her body was cleaned, wrapped in layers of plastic, and placed in a large sealed container. Daniel didn't speak, he watched. When the work was done, he helped them carry her body into the woods behind the structure. The hole had already been dug the day before. They lowered her in, covered the grave, and burned the tools that couldn't be reused. Then they left, silent as ghosts, their footprints disappearing behind them in the leaves. Daniel returned to the cottage, cleaned every surface, deleted messages, and wiped his laptop. He posted a scheduled photo of a sunset from Emma's account. The caption read, "Feeling grateful for quiet moments like these." He smiled as he sent it. In just 3 weeks, he had turned a marriage into a murder. Emma Foster was gone, buried in a nameless patch of dirt beneath a sky that no longer held any meaning for her. And no one, not her parents, not her friends, not her co-workers, suspected a thing? The morning after Emma's body was buried, Daniel Reed sat on the front porch of the rented cottage, sipping coffee as if nothing had changed. The sun rose slowly over the treetops, casting soft light on the gravel driveway. Birds chirped in the trees, the forest waking up around him. To any passerby, he looked like a man on vacation. Inside, however, the house was too clean, sterile, almost. Every trace of Emma had been removed. Her clothes were packed and ready to be donated. Her toothbrush, her journal, the mug she always used, gone. What remained was a carefully staged version of a life that had never really existed. Daniel left the cottage that afternoon. He returned the rental keys using the drop box and headed to a short-term apartment he'd arranged weeks earlier under another false name. His plan was to vanish quietly and move states again, but not before finishing the final steps. The fixer had already transferred his payment into cryptocurrency, nearly $70,000 for the organs. It wasn't much compared to what buyers would pay overseas, but it was enough to clear his immediate debts and keep moving. He checked the burner phone for updates. The buyers had received the shipments. The organs were being prepped for black market transplants in unregulated clinics across Eastern Europe. It was a grotesque process, and Daniel knew exactly what he had helped set in motion, but he didn't care. Emma had simply been a piece in the puzzle, a body with high-value parts, nothing more. He had made sure to choose someone healthy, without known conditions, and most importantly, someone who trusted easily. But loose ends still worried him. The medic and fixer had both disappeared just as planned. They operated like shadows, no names, no traces, no second chances. Daniel wasn't worried about them. He was worried about Emma's digital footprint. He needed to keep the illusion alive long enough to avoid raising suspicion. He scheduled more social media posts through a proxy server. Traveling out west for a bit, trying to unplug. He added some generic travel photos he pulled from a stock image site. Her friends and family, still assuming she was off-grid with her new husband, reacted with likes and well wishes. Still, not everything was within his control. Emma's sister, Lily, had tried calling multiple times in the last few days. The calls went unanswered. Daniel had silenced the phone and responded via text, pretending to be Emma. "All good, just no service here. We'll catch up soon." It bought him time, but Lily's tone had changed. The messages were shorter now, colder. Suspicion was slowly creeping in. Daniel considered making it look like Emma had left him voluntarily. Maybe a note, a staged sighting in another city. But that would mean staying longer, taking more risks. He didn't like that. Instead, he decided to accelerate his exit. He booked a one-way flight to Colorado using a fake ID. In 3 days, he'd be gone. Back in Charlotte, however, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Emma was not the kind of person to disappear. She never ignored messages, never left people hanging. And the posts didn't sound like her. They were vague, impersonal, and felt off. Lily noticed small things, typos Emma never made. Odd phrasing, pictures that didn't match her taste. She brought it up to their parents, but they told her to relax. "She's newly married," her mother said. "Let her enjoy the time away." But Lily didn't relax. She called Emma's school, only to find out that Emma hadn't been in touch since she took a leave 3 weeks earlier. The principal assumed she'd just extended her break. No one had checked in. That night, Lily contacted the police. She explained everything, her sister's sudden disappearance, the strange messages, the silence. It was enough to prompt a missing person report. Authorities started with the basics. They attempted to contact Emma directly, no response. When they tried Daniel, he answered with rehearsed calm, claiming Emma had left on her own to find space and clarity. He said she was traveling alone now, exploring, healing, but he couldn't provide a specific location. He told them she didn't want to be found. It raised eyebrows. Detectives began digging. Emma's bank account hadn't been touched in days. Her credit cards were inactive. Her phone's last GPS signal led them to the woods outside the rental cottage. The data wasn't recent, but it was the only solid lead. They reached out to the rental company and discovered Daniel had stayed there, but there was no record of Emma checking in. That inconsistency became a red flag. Meanwhile, Lily handed over text records and screenshots of the strange posts. Digital forensics began analyzing Emma's social accounts. They found that all the posts had been made using a single IP address, which didn't match Emma's usual activity. It matched Daniel's. The search escalated. A warrant was issued for the cabin. Police and forensics units arrived quietly and began examining the property. The cabin itself was empty, but in the woods behind it, something caught their attention: freshly disturbed earth. Cadaver dogs confirmed the worst. Beneath layers of soil and plastic, they uncovered a female body in a decomposing state. Though DNA testing would take time, items found buried with the remains a necklace Emma always wore. Her engagement ring left little doubt. The case transformed from a missing person inquiry into a homicide investigation. Daniel, meanwhile, was packing. He hadn't yet heard that the body had been found. His flight was less than 24 hours away. But what he didn't know was that law enforcement had already begun tracking his digital activity and had flagged his plane ticket. Surveillance footage from the cabin area had picked up his SUV weeks earlier, and credit card records had tied him to the medical equipment rental. The walls were closing in. He had built a perfect lie. But now it was starting to collapse. The moment authorities confirmed the body in the woods belonged to Emma Foster, the case shifted into high gear. Crime scene investigators worked through the night collecting evidence, carefully cataloging every detail around the shallow grave. The plastic wrap, the disturbed soil, the faint traces of chemicals, all of it painted a chilling picture. Even without the final autopsy, the nature of the wounds on Emma's body made one thing disturbingly clear: her organs had been surgically removed. That discovery transformed the case from a domestic homicide to something far darker and more complex. Detectives realized this wasn't a crime of passion. It was premeditated, calculated, and carried out with precision. The surgical nature of the incisions suggested professional involvement. This wasn't Daniel working alone, he had help. Now the question was who, and how far had this network reached? As forensic analysts dug deeper into Daniel's digital trail, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. His online activity revealed connections to dark web forums, encrypted messaging apps, and cryptocurrency wallets linked to known organ trafficking rings. A fake name used to rent the cabin matched a burner account on one of these networks. Investigators traced it back to purchases of medical equipment, including anesthesia and sterile surgical supplies. All roads pointed to Daniel not just as a killer, but as a willing participant in an international black market operation. By now, Daniel had checked into a hotel under yet another alias. He was calm, detached, and methodical. His luggage was light. He traveled with only a backpack, a burner phone, and a laptop with all identifying data wiped clean. He planned to vanish into another city, start again, and possibly repeat what he had done with Emma. For him, this wasn't a one-time act. It was a business model. Victims were chosen for their vulnerability: women with small families, quiet lives, limited digital security. He had a process, and he believed he was untouchable. But as he prepared to board his flight, authorities moved quickly. Using the name from the fake ID used to purchase the ticket, agents flagged the reservation. Plainclothes officers intercepted him at the gate. Daniel didn't resist. He offered no explanation, no emotion, just silence. His arrest made local headlines instantly, sending shockwaves through the Charlotte community. To the people who had attended the wedding just weeks earlier, the news was incomprehensible. No one could reconcile the smiling groom in their memories with the monster described in the police reports. Back at the police station, Daniel remained uncooperative. He spoke only when absolutely necessary. requesting a lawyer and refusing to answer any questions about Emma or the organ trafficking operation. But the evidence against him continued to mount. His fingerprints were found on the plastic wrap used to conceal Emma's body. His search history revealed dozens of chilling queries, fast-acting sedatives, black market kidney buyers, how long do organs survive after death, and how to erase GPS data. Investigators also managed to recover fragments of deleted files from his laptop. These included encrypted chats with usernames connected to global trafficking operations and a list of potential future victims' names, photos, and health details. Some were women he had met through dating apps and briefly communicated with under other identities. Each one had been marked with notes: no family nearby, recently moved, healthy, low profile. Emma's family, meanwhile, was consumed with grief. Lily was the one who had sounded the alarm, but the reality of what had happened crushed her. The guilt weighed heavily. She replayed every message, every ignored instinct, every delay in reporting her sister missing. Their parents were devastated. They couldn't understand how their daughter, bright, kind, and full of promise, could have ended up a target for something so horrific. The community held a vigil in Emma's memory, lighting candles outside the school where she taught. Her students, many too young to grasp the details, left cards and drawings on the steps. The town mourned, stunned by how easily such evil had crept in wearing a friendly face. As the investigation expanded, authorities tracked down the fixer and the rogue medic. Both had gone into hiding, but international law enforcement, now alerted by Interpol, caught one of them in a remote village in Romania. The other was found in a rundown apartment in Nevada, living under an assumed name. Their arrests confirmed what detectives already suspected: this wasn't just Daniel's crime. It was part of a wider, organized operation trafficking organs from victims in multiple countries. In court, the prosecution laid out a timeline so disturbing it left the courtroom in silence. They revealed how Daniel had spent months researching Emma, how he had manipulated her into quitting her job, isolated her from her friends, and methodically weakened her body. They presented medical expert testimony on the nature of the organ removals, explaining that she had likely been kept alive during the initial procedure and only died during or shortly after the extraction. The details horrified even the most seasoned jurors. Daniel showed no emotion during the trial. He refused to testify, leaving his lawyer to offer a weak defense centered on mental instability. The jury didn't buy it. The verdict came swiftly guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder, conspiracy to traffic human organs, unlawful body disposal, and fraud. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The fixer and the medic received similar sentences, with ongoing investigations into their links to larger networks. For the public, the case served as a terrifying reminder of the darkness that can hide behind a smile. Emma's story became a cautionary tale about trust, manipulation, and the importance of vigilance. Her family pushed for stronger legislation around black market organ trafficking, determined to make sure no one else endured what they had. In the end, justice was served, but nothing could bring Emma back. Her life was stolen not by a stranger, but by the man she had promised to love forever. After Daniel's sentencing, the case left a mark far beyond the courtroom. News outlets across the country covered it relentlessly, dubbing it the Honeymoon harvest murder. It became one of the most disturbing criminal cases in recent memory, not just because of the brutality, but because of the precision with which it was carried out. It wasn't fueled by rage or impulse. It was quiet, calm, and entirely planned. The idea that someone could marry with the intent to kill, that someone could feign love with such ease, unsettled even the most hardened investigators. In the weeks that followed, public reaction evolved from shock to outrage. People demanded answers. How could someone like Daniel move through society unnoticed? How could such a network of organ traffickers operate under the radar for so long? Lawmakers held emergency hearings. Federal agencies launched new investigations into dark web marketplaces suspected of trafficking in human organs and body parts. A task force was created to track financial trails tied to encrypted cryptocurrency accounts like the ones Daniel had used. Behind the scenes, Emma's family tried to rebuild their lives. Her parents, once full of hope for her future, withdrew from the world, Their house became quiet, curtains drawn most days. They rarely answered the phone. Her mother removed the wedding photos from the mantel and boxed up Emma's childhood belongings, unable to look at them. Her father, who had once walked her down the aisle, now avoided talking about that day altogether. Lily, on the other hand, chose a different path. She couldn't allow herself to retreat. She had been the first to suspect something was wrong. Her instincts had been right, but she still lived with the torment of not acting sooner. That guilt propelled her forward. She launched a website dedicated to Emma's memory, sharing the timeline of her disappearance, the warning signs she missed, and the red flags others could learn from. It quickly gained traction. Families from across the country reached out, some with similar stories, others simply grieving a woman they'd never met. With public pressure mounting, investigators reopened several cold cases involving missing women across multiple states. Some bore striking similarities to Emma's story. Sudden disappearances, last messages that seemed out of character, connections to unknown romantic partners. In one case, a woman in Ohio had vanished 2 years earlier under nearly identical circumstances. Her boyfriend, also using an alias, had disappeared shortly afterward. Detectives began piecing together what many feared Emma was likely not the first victim. Daniel, now in a maximum security prison, remained silent. He refused interviews, declined therapy, and kept to himself. He showed no signs of remorse or emotion. Inmates and guards alike described him as distant, controlled, unnerving. He never spoke of Emma. To him, it was all over. The plan had run its course. He had been caught, but he had no intention of offering closure. Emma's case became a subject of college lectures, true crime documentaries, and legal panels. Criminologists dissected Daniel's psychological profile, pointing out the cold detachment and manipulative behaviors that signaled sociopathy. Others focused on the systemic failures that allowed someone to obtain multiple identities and operate undetected for years. The case became a mirror reflecting society's vulnerabilities, how easy it is to hide behind a screen, how blind love can be when trust overrides logic, and how the digital age can be both a mask and a weapon. Eventually, Emma's body was cremated, and her ashes scattered in the gardens behind her childhood home, one of her favorite places. A small plaque was placed beneath a cherry blossom tree that read simply, "Emma Foster loved, cherished, remembered." It became a place where her students and neighbors could visit, leaving flowers, cards, and notes. On the anniversary of her death, her former school held a memorial, planting trees in her honor and creating a scholarship for young girls interested in teaching. But for all the tributes, the legacy Emma left behind was not just in remembrance, it was in the awareness her tragedy sparked. Conversations shifted. Women began asking more questions about the people they dated. Background check services saw a spike in use. Apps that offered anonymous identity verification became more popular. Emma's name became a symbol not of weakness, but of how easily the good can be manipulated by the wicked. In the end, what frightened people most wasn't the crime itself, but the quiet way it unfolded. There had been no screaming, no police chase, no sudden disappearance in the night. Emma had gone into that marriage smiling. She had walked into that cottage willingly. She had trusted the man beside her with her life, and that trust was what he had counted on. It was the weapon he used more effectively than any tool. The world moved on, but the horror of Emma's story remained. Not as a headline, not as entertainment, but as a reminder. Evil doesn't always come in darkness. Sometimes it wears a ring, smiles gently, and waits patiently for the perfect moment to strike.